In this powerful chapter, we witness the profound and tender care of the Blessed Virgin Mary as she watches over the early church with divine wisdom and maternal love. As the apostles spread the gospel and the number of believers multiplies, Mary becomes the spiritual heartbeat of the faithful, protecting, guiding, and consoling Christ's newborn flock. She supports the apostles during their missions, dispatches angels to defend them against demonic attacks, and personally intercedes for the sick, the poor, and the dying. Her loving charity knows no bounds, even descending upon the home of a dying girl, ensnared by the devil, rescuing her from eternal ruin. Join us as we explore this deeply moving account of Mary's spiritual motherhood, a chapter filled with miracles, supernatural battles, and the soul-saving power of a mother's intercession. Virgo Potens presents Book 7, Chapter 4 of the Mystical City of God by Venerable Mary of Agreda. Solicitude of Mary for the Apostles and the Faithful. As the new law of grace continued to spread in Jerusalem, so the number of the faithful increased, and the new evangelical church was augmented day by day. Acts 5:14. In like manner did the solicitude and attention of its great queen and teacher, Mary, expand toward the new children engendered by the apostles through their preaching. As they were the foundation stones of the church on which the security of that building was to depend, the most prudent lady lavished a special care upon the apostolic college. Her heavenly solicitude augmented in proportion to the wrath of Lucifer against the followers of Christ, and especially against the apostles, as the ministers of eternal salvation to the other faithful. It will never be possible to describe or to estimate in this life the blessings and favors conferred by her upon the church and upon each of its mystical members. This happened especially in regard to the apostles and disciples, for as has been revealed to me, not a day or hour passed in which she did not work for them many wonders. I will relate in this chapter some of the events, which are very instructive on account of the secrets of divine providence therein contained. From them we can form an estimate of the most vigilant charity and zeal of the Blessed Mary for souls. All the apostles she loved and served with incredible affection and reverence, both on account of their great holiness and on account of their dignity as priests, as ministers, preachers, and founders of the gospel. During all their stay in Jerusalem, she attended upon them, counseled them, and directed them in the manner noted above. With the increase of the church, they were obliged to go outside of Jerusalem in order to baptize and admit to faith many of the inhabitants of the neighboring places. But they always returned to the city because they had purposely delayed separating from each other or leaving Jerusalem until they should receive orders to do so. From the Acts, we learn that St. Peter went Lydda and Jaffa, where he raised Tabitha from the dead and performed other miracles, returning again to Jerusalem. Although St. Luke relates these excursions after speaking of the death of St. Stephen, of which I shall treat in the following chapter, yet during these events many were converted throughout Palestine, and it was necessary that the apostles go forth to preach to them and to confirm them in the faith, always returning in order to give an account of their doings to their heavenly mistress. During all their journeys and preachings, the common enemy of all sought to hinder the spread of the divine word or its fruit by rousing the unbelievers to many contradictions and altercations with the apostles and their listeners or converts. For it seemed to the infernal dragon more easy to assault them when he saw them removed and far from the protection of their mistress. So formidable the great queen of the angels appeared to the hellish hosts, that in spite of the eminent holiness of the apostles, Lucifer imagined them disarmed and at his mercy, easily approachable to his temptations, as soon as they left the presence of Mary. The furious pride of this dragon, as is written in Job, esteems the toughest steel as weak straw, and the hardest bronze as a stick of rotten wood. He fears not the dart nor the sling, but he dreaded the protection of the most blessed Mary, and in tempting the apostles, he waited until they should have left her presence. But her protection failed them not on that account, for the great lady, from the watchtower of her exalted knowledge, reached out in every direction. Like a most vigilant sentinel, she discovered the assaults of Lucifer, and hastened to the relief of her sons and ministers of her Lord. When, in her absence, she could not speak to the apostles in any of their afflictions, she immediately sent her holy angels to their assistance in order to encourage, forewarn, and console them, and sometimes also to drive away the assaulting demons. All these the celestial spirits executed promptly in compliance with the orders of their queen. At times they would do it secretly by inspirations and interior consolations. At others, and more frequently, they manifested themselves visibly, assuming most beautiful and refulgent bodies, and informing the apostles of what was proper for the occasion, or what had been ordered by their mistress. This happened very often on account of their purity and holiness, and on account of the necessity of favoring them with such an abundance of consolation and encouragement. In all their difficulties and labors, the most loving mother thus assisted them, besides offering up for them her continual prayers and thanksgiving. She was the strong woman, whose domestics were sheltered by double garments, the mother of the family, who supplied all with nourishment, and who by the labors of her hands planted the vineyard of the Lord. With all the other faithful, she proportionately exhibited the same care. And although there were many converts in Jerusalem and in Palestine, she remembered them all in their necessities and tribulations, and she thought not only of the needs of their souls, but of those of the body, and many she cured of most grave sicknesses. Others, whom she knew were not to be cured miraculously, she visited and assisted in person. Of the poor, she took a still greater care, with her own hand administering to them food on their beds of sickness, and seeing to their being kept clean, as if she were the servant of all, infirm with the infirm. So great was the humility, the charity and solicitude of the great Queen of the world, that she refused no service or lowliest ministry to the faithful, no matter how humble and insignificant the condition of those applying for her assistance. She filled each one with joy and consolation, and lightened all their labors. Those upon whom, on account of their absence, she could not personally attend, she assisted secretly through her holy angels, or by her prayers and petitions. In an especial manner, her maternal kindness exhibited itself to those who were in the agony of death, for she attended many of the dying, and would not leave them until they had secured their eternal salvation. For those who went to purgatory, she offered up most fervent prayers, and performed some works of penance, such as prostrations in the form of a cross, genuflections and other exercises by which she satisfied for their faults. Then she sent one of her angels, in order to draw them from purgatory and present them to her Son in heaven as his own and as the fruits of his blood and redemption. This happiness the Queen of Heaven procured to many souls during her stay upon earth. And as far as was made known to me, this favor is not denied in our days to those who during their earthly life dispose themselves properly for meriting her presence, as I have written in another place. But since it would be necessary to extend the scope of this history very much, if I were to describe how the most blessed Mary assisted many in the hour of death, I cannot dilate upon this matter. I will recount only one incident in which she freed a girl from the jaws of the infernal dragon. It is one which is so extraordinary and worthy of the attention of us all that it would not be right to omit it in this history or deprive ourselves of the lesson it contains. Among the 5,000 who were first converted and who received baptism in Jerusalem, there was also a young girl of poor and humble parentage. This young woman, busying herself with her household duties, took ill, and for many days she dragged on in her sickness without improvement. As happens to many other souls, she on that account fell from her first fervour, and in her neglect committed some sins, endangering her baptismal grace. Lucifer, who never relaxed in his thirst for the ruin of souls, approached this woman and attacked her with fiercest cruelty, being thus permitted by God to do so for his greater glory and that of his most blessed mother. The demon appeared to her in the form of another woman, and with much cajolery told her to withdraw from those people who were preaching the crucified, and not to believe anything they said, because it was all falsehood, that if she would not follow this advice, she would be punished by the priests and judges who had crucified the teacher of that new and counterfeit religion, whereas, if she obeyed, she would live peacefully and free from danger. The girl answered, I will do what thou sayest. But what shall I do in regard to that lady, whom I have seen with these men and women, and who appears to be so kind and peaceful? I desire her goodwill very much. The demon replied, This one, whom thou mentionest, is worse than all the rest, and her thou must shun before all. It is most important that thou withdraw from her snares. Infested with this deadly poison of the ancient serpent, the soul of this simple dove was brought near to eternal death, and her body, instead of being relieved, dropped into more serious illness and was in danger of a premature end. One of the 72 disciples who visited the faithful was informed of the dangerous illness of the girl, for from her neighbors he heard that one of his sect living in that house was on the point of expiring. The disciple entered in order to visit her and encourage her according to her necessities. But the sick girl was so ensnared by the demons that she did not receive him or answer him one word, although he zealously sought to exhort and instruct her. She, on the contrary, sought to hide and stop her ears in order not to hear him. From these signs, the apostle saw the imminent peril of this soul, although he did not know the cause. Eagerly he hastened to report to the apostle St. John, who without delay visited the patient, admonishing her and speaking to her words of eternal life, if she would only listen. But she treated him in the same way as the disciple, obstinately resisting the efforts of both. The apostle saw many legions of devils surrounding the girl, and though they retired at his approach, they failed not immediately afterward to renew the illusion with which they had filled the unhappy girl. Seeing her obstinacy, the apostle betook himself in great affliction to the most blessed Mary in order to ask for help. Immediately the great queen turned her interior vision upon the sick one, and she recognized the unhappy and dangerous condition in which the enemy had drawn that soul. The kind mother bewailed this simple sheep, thus deceived by the bloodthirsty infernal wolf, and prostrate upon the floor, she prayed for her rescue. The most blessed Mary continued for some time in this petition, but she received no answer from the Lord, in order that her invincible heart and her charity toward her neighbor might be put to the proof. The most prudent Virgin bethought herself of what had happened to the prophet Eliseus, who had vainly sent his staff with his servant Gizi to resuscitate the boy, and had found that he himself must touch and stretch himself over his body in order to restore him to life. Neither the angel nor the apostle were powerful enough to awaken from sin and from the stupor of Satan that unfortunate girl. Therefore the great lady resolved to go and heal her in person. This resolve she recommended to the Lord in her prayer, and although she received no answer, she considered that the work itself was a sufficient warranty to proceed. She arose therefore to leave her room and to walk with St. John to the dwelling of the sick woman, which was at some distance from the cenacle. But no sooner had she taken the first steps than the holy angels, at the command of the Lord, approached to bear her up on the way. As God had not manifested his intention, she asked them why they thus detained her, to which they answered, "There is no reason why we should consent to thy walking through the city, when we can bear thee along with greater propriety." Immediately they placed her upon a throne of resplendent clouds, on which they bore her along and placed her in the sick room. The dying girl, being poor and now speechless, had been forsaken by all, and was surrounded only by the demons, who waited to snatch off her soul. But as soon as the Queen of Angels made her appearance, all the evil spirits vanished like flashes of lightning, and as if falling over each other in their dismay. The powerful Queen commanded them to descend into hell and remain there until she should permit them to come forth. And this they were forced to do without the least power of resistance. The kindest mother then approached the sick woman, and taking her by the hand and calling her by her name, spoke sweetest words of life. Instantly, a complete change came over the girl, and she began to breathe more freely and recover herself. Then she said to the heavenly Mary, "My lady, a woman came to me who persuaded me to believe that the disciples of Jesus were deceiving me, and that I had better immediately separate myself from them and from thee. Otherwise, if I should accept their way of life, I should fall into great misfortune." The Queen answered, "My daughter, she who seemed to thee a woman was thy enemy, the devil. I come in the name of the Most High to give thee eternal life. Return then to his true faith which thou hast received, and confess him with all thy heart as thy God and Redeemer, who, for thy salvation and that of all the world, has died upon the cross. Adore and call upon him, and ask him for the pardon of thy sins." "All this," the patient answered, "I have believed before, but they told me it was very bad, and that they would punish me if I should ever confess it." The heavenly teacher replied, "My friend, do not fear this deceit, but remember that the chastisement and pains which are really to be feared are those of hell, to which the demons wish to bring thee. Thou art now very near death, and thou canst avail thyself of the remedy I now offer thee, if thou wilt only believe me, and thou shalt thus free thyself of the eternal fire which threatens thee on account of thy mistake." Through this exhortation and the graces procured for this poor woman by Mary, she was moved to abundant tears of compunction, and implored the Blessed Lady further to assist her in this danger, declaring herself ready to obey all her commands. Then the loving mother made her openly profess her faith in Jesus Christ and elicit an act of contrition in preparation for confession. At the same time, she sent for the apostles to administer the sacraments to her. The sick girl, repeating the acts of contrition and love, and invoking Jesus and Mary, who was directing her, happily expired in the arms of her protectress. Words of the Queen. My daughter, since in this chapter thou hast particularly learnt of the matchless and bitter sorrow with which I bewailed the perdition of souls, thou thyself must learn also what thou must do for the salvation of thy own and that of others, in order to imitate me in the perfection which I require of thee. No torment, nor death itself, would I have refused. If such had been necessary to save any of the damned, and to save them, I would have esteemed all sufferings a sweet alleviation in my most ardent charity. Hence, if thou dost not die of this kind of sorrow, thou art at least not excused from willingness to suffer all that the Lord sends thee for advancing this cause, or from praying and labouring all in thy power to prevent any sin in thy neighbour. And when thou canst not all at once obtain thy object, or dost not know whether the Lord has heard thee, do not lose confidence, but enliven it, and persevere in thy efforts. For such a solicitude can never displease him who desires the salvation of all his redeemed more than thou. If nevertheless thou art not heard in thy prayers, make use of the means which prudence and charity require, and return anew to thy prayers. The Most High is always attracted by this sort of charity for the neighbour, and by the love which seeks to hinder sin. He desires not the death of the sinner, and as thou hast written, he does not entertain an absolute and antecedent decree of damning his creatures, but seeks to save them all, if they not pursue perdition of their own free will. Although he permits this in his justice, as being inseparable from the free will of man, it is against his inclination. Do not restrict thyself in these petitions, and in those concerning temporal things. Pray that his holy will be done in all that is proper. If I desire that thou labour with such fervour of charity for the salvation of thy brethren, consider what thou must do to save thyself, and in what estimation thou must hold thy own soul, for which an infinite price was offered. I wish to admonish thee as a mother, that when temptations and passions incline thee toward the commission of any sin, no matter how small, remember the sorrows and the tears which the knowledge of the sins of men and the desire to prevent them has caused me. Do not thou cause the like in me, my dearest, for although I am now incapable of that pain, yet thou deprivest me of the accidental joy of seeing thee, to whom I condescended to become a mother and teacher, really endowed with the perfection taught in my school. If thou art unfaithful in this, thou wilt frustrate my great desire of seeing thee please my divine Son and accomplish his holy will in all its plenitude. By the infused light which thou receivest, do thou ponder how great are any faults thou mayest commit after being so favoured and bound in duty to the Lord and to myself. Dangers and temptations will not be wanting to thee during the rest of thy earthly life, but in all of them remember my teaching, my sorrows and my tears, and above all what thou owest to my divine Son, who is so liberal toward thee in applying to thee the fruit of his blood for the purpose of eliciting thy grateful correspondence.
Thanks for stopping by and watching my video to the end. Please hit the like button and subscribe to this channel. Doing so really helps me to reach more souls. If you enjoyed this video, or think that this work may be helpful for others, please consider supporting me through Patreon. Or, if you would prefer making a one-time contribution, just click on the Super Thanks icon below the video title. Your generous support helps to keep this channel going. To everyone who watches my videos and/or supports me, I offer my sincere gratitude. May God bless you.